What's up YouTube? Today we are looking at Cherry Audio PS-20. Spoiler alert, this thing is an absolute beast. So it's modeled after the Korg MS-20, which was actually quite popular within the Psytrance genre. So I thought perfect opportunity to have a look at this plugin. I'm sure you guys will enjoy the sound that it creates, and you'll probably recognize a few of them from kind of like old school tracks and that kind of thing. So anyway, let's dive in and have a look. So I usually do a fair amount of like playing around and, you know, research about particular plugins before I dive in and start creating content on those plugins. But I think with this one, it's particularly special for me. I actually used to own an MS-10 very long ago. It was my first analog synth that I ever played with, or first synth that I actually ever played with was Korg MS-10, which is a very much simplified version of what we have in front of us here, the MS-20 kind of style. The synth itself, both the MS-10 and the MS-20, have a very particular kind of gnarly, gritty sound that is very nice for creating these kind of like leads that are really kind of distorted and stand out without needing too much kind of post-processing and stuff like that. As you can see, the synth offers quite a fair amount of modularity. You can patch things in and out, and I think that's really the special thing with this synth. It was one of the first kind of like commercially affordable synths that offered you the ability to patch things and get really creative with the sound design, and this really pushed things, really pushed the kind of sonic spectrum of what people were doing at the time. This is capable of, you know, like I said, traditional subtractive kind of leads, but also really experimental industrial kind of sound design type of things. So yeah, like I said, I haven't actually dived too in depth with this particular plugin, but I do know the MS-10, MS-20 style of synthesis pretty well. I was just playing with it for a few minutes. Okay, I'm up with this really cool kind of industrial-esque kind of sound, and I wanted to show you guys. We can start off with this sound and then maybe create some of our own patches, and I want to talk through the architecture of the synth and how it's laid out, because it's a little bit weird when you look at it at first. You know, we're probably used to synths that have flashy GUIs and all sorts of things, but you see, the thing with that is it often paints you into a particular paradigm. I find when a lot of things kind of look the same, you're a little bit confused as to where to go, so you kind of just play around with things and plug things in where you're probably not supposed to, and these things lead to weird experimental things. So anyway, this is the sound that I was talking about. So yeah, I just wanted to show you, regardless of the kind of Korg MS's style of pretty simple synthesis, you're still capable of getting these really crazy kind of sounds. So yeah, let's dive in and create something a little bit more kind of musical or usable, something that we would probably recognize. So one thing to bear in mind is the traditional MS-10 and MS-20 were both monophonic synths. So the Cherry Audio PS-20 is a polyphonic synth, so we can create chords with the same kind of style as we would have with the Korgs and that kind of thing, or we can set it to the traditional kind of monophonic mode. So how we can change that to the more like traditional style is by using this selector switch over here. So we can set this to mono. Other interesting things is it's got unison mode built in and various other kind of things that it's kind of adapted from some of the other Cherry Audio stuff. If you've seen some of my other videos, then you'll know what I'm talking about. So for a more traditional MS-20 style of a sound, we can just set this to mono. Over here, we've got the portamento time. So this would be the amount of time between glided notes. So the synth has two oscillators, and you've got a mixer over here, and that's how you control which of the oscillators is playing. So by default, both oscillators is all the way up, but we can choose, do we want just the saw wave, or we can split, two saw waves, detune one slightly, do some kind of unison stuff, or we can do a simple kind of single oscillator sound. So let's just, for now, use just VCO1 by turning down VCO2. in terms of the signal flow of the synth, you've got the oscillators here on the left, and then those two patch into the mixers, which then patch into the filters, which then patch into the output. So the signal flow kind of goes from left to right in the synth. And the stuff underneath each of these sections is basically the modulators for that section. So for example, here, we've got the single oscillator from the mixer passing to the filter section, and just below the filters here, you'll see you've got mod gen, and we've got EG. And what these are is, mod gen is basically mod generator. So that's the LFO. And EG is the envelope generator. So these are the ways that we would patch into controlling the actual filters with wobbly sounds and all sorts of stuff. And the modulation generators are over here. Bear in mind, we can still patch things in various creative ways using the semi-modular section over here. We could, for example, send the oscillator to modulate the filter, or the oscillator to modulate the frequency of another oscillator, therefore creating like a sort of hacky FM type of thing. Once we take into account like the signal flow of things, the sound design on something like this becomes a little bit more simple. And the reason this is so cool is it's kind of like, if you understand the signal flow of it, you're able to get sounds out of this kind of thing really, really quickly. So how the filters work is you've got a high pass filter and a low pass filter. You can either use these together to kind of create like a band pass filter, or you can use them separately, you know, to filter in and filter out and that kind of thing. And I don't believe the MS-20, the original design, had the ability to split, parallel, or serial the filters. I believe that they were just always in serial. So this makes things a little bit cooler. You know, when you set things to parallel, you can do interesting band passy type things. But anyway, we're going to play around with that a little bit. For now, let's just do a simple saw wave with a high pass filter. So here you'll see a control called peak, and this is essentially the resonance of the filter. One thing that's just a little bit difficult to wrap your head around like the Korgs and a lot of the other synths is that they use terminology that was very different. Not only that, is the actual patches, in terms of the voltages and stuff that they send, they were very different to other synths at the time, so you couldn't really use them together without some sort of adapter system. So it was almost like there was these two very different styles of synthesizer. You know, outside of the world of West Coast and East Coast, we had Korg, which were using different terminology and different voltages and all sorts of stuff, and then we had stuff like Moog, Roland, and all the other ones which had a kind of more standardized terminology and voltages and that kind of thing. So it's almost like Korg was trying to do something completely different. You know, not just what they called the parameters on the filters. The filters actually sound quite unique. And then we've also got a drive control over here. So if we want to send modulation to this high pass filter, it's as easy as just turning up this amount over here, and it's all already pre-patched. So now this modulation generator, which is an LFO, is essentially modulating our filter. So some other things that the Korg didn't actually have built in was the built-in reverb that you've got here, obviously just to add a little bit of effects if stuff is a little bit dry. We can obviously add that in the DAW if you want. And there's also a little sequencer built in here. I do believe there was another kind of add-on module that you could get for your Korg MS-10 and MS-20. I think it was called like a PS-2000 or something, performance sequencer. And that allowed you the opportunity to sequence different parameters and stuff like that. So here we could patch the CV of the sequencer into, for example, our filter. So where that is over here, high pass filter, cutoff frequency. And now we can sequence these values. Let's just punch in some random stuff over here. And we'll have to hit start to actually let it move. So here you'll see it's EG2/patch PNL, which stands for panel, obviously. So this amount now bypasses the envelope generator input to the cutoff, and it becomes the amount of this modulation that's being sent. And then we can change the amount of voltage over here. So using this range on the sequencer, we can set this all the way up to 5 volts to get a nice big range on that modulation. And then we can combine that with the LFO again. Cool, that sounds good. Although here, what I want to do is I want to actually sync this time of the sequencer to our DAW. We could probably sync the LFO as well, but I like that kind of slower movement that's happening there. And let's record in, or let's sequence in something that could potentially fit into the track. So here what we could do is we could set this gate of the sequencer to actually trigger the envelope. We would set that using this output over here, and we would send this to the EG1 gate in. I think by default the EG2 is the amplitude. So we're going to set this to send to the EG2 instead. And with really low decay times, you can get this nice pingy type of effect. Let's try with a bit more peak on the filter. I see there's also a echo that's built in here, which is pretty cool. Let's sync this, do like a 1/8 dotted, you know, the usual. That's a very nice percussive thing. So there's actually 3 lanes of sequencer built in here. You can select them using this CV selector switch over here. So if we go to lane 2, we can quantize each one individually. So let's say, for example, quantize lane 2. Let's add some modulation there. And then we can send this out to the keyboard input of VCO1. Let's turn this up an octave. So now what this is going to do is it's going to actually sequence the pitch of this oscillator. So when you sequence something in, playing with the number of steps of the sequence is a really nice and easy way of creating this kind of like moving pattern. It's quite often used in techno, but also for creating these kind of like bills and that kind of thing, where you have this kind of like groove going and it's slowly developing over time. Let's use envelope 1 to trigger the filter. So let's send output here to the filter, the low pass filter input. And then with a little bit of processing, EQs, reverbs, and delays, this is the result of those two sounds. Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Big thanks to Cherry Audio for sending me this plugin. I really like the sound of it. It's pretty close to what I remember that kind of classic Korg sound to be. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know your thoughts. And yeah, if you haven't yet, hit that like button. Consider subscribing to my channel and see you guys next time. Cheers.